My dad passed away, my stepmom kicked me out. Then she discovered who I really was. The night my father died, my stepmother stood in the doorway of his study and told me I had 20 minutes to pack. I was still wearing the black dress I'd worn to the funeral. My father's photograph sat on the piano behind me, surrounded by flowers that had begun to wilt under the heat of the house. Less than 3 hours earlier, I had watched relatives gather in the living room, speaking softly and holding cups of coffee they barely touched. Everyone had hugged me. Everyone had said my father would have wanted me to be strong. Then the last guest left. The front door clicked shut. And suddenly, the house didn't feel like my father's home anymore. It felt like a place where I was no longer welcome. My stepmother, Evelyn, folded her arms. You heard me, Claire. Ich zählte her. 20 minutes. 20. I almost laughed because I couldn't understand what I was hearing. My dad just died. I know. You want me to leave tonight? She looked toward the hallway instead of at me. This house is going to be complicated enough without you making things harder. I looked at the framed photograph of my father on the desk. He was smiling in it. The same smile he had worn whenever he wanted me to believe everything would eventually work out. I turned back to Evelyn. Where am I supposed to go? She shrugged. You're 32. You'll figure it out. That was when I noticed the banker standing behind her. He was holding a leather folder. He wouldn't meet my eyes. And suddenly I understood something. This wasn't an argument. It was a plan. I picked up my father's old fountain pen from the desk. It had been sitting beside his papers for years. He had given it to me when I graduated from college. Keep this, he'd said. One day you'll need to sign something important. I had laughed then. I wasn't laughing now. I put the pen in my purse. 20 minutes, I whispered. Evelyn nodded. But she had made one mistake. She thought she was throwing out a grieving daughter. She had no idea who she was actually sending away. My name is Claire Bennett. And before my father died, I had spent 8 years building something he had never told anyone about. Something that would eventually change everything Evelyn believed she owned. I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that my hands were shaking as I walked upstairs. My bedroom looked exactly as I had left it that morning. A blue sweater on the chair. Books beside the bed. A framed photograph of my father and me from my 21st birthday. I picked it up. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My father had one arm around my shoulders. I was laughing. He was looking at me instead of the camera. I remembered what he'd said that night. Claire, promise me something. What? Never let anyone convince you that being quiet means being weak. I hadn't understood what he meant. Not then. I understood now. I opened my closet and pulled out a suitcase. Evelyn appeared at the doorway. You don't need everything. I looked at her. I know. She glanced at the photograph in my hand. Leave that. I held it closer. No. Her jaw tightened. Claire, please don't turn this into a scene. I almost smiled. A scene. My father died today, I said. I'm standing in his house with one suitcase because you told me to leave. I'm not the one making a scene. She looked away. That was when the banker quietly said, Mrs. Bennett, perhaps we should wait downstairs. Evelyn nodded. She left. I packed slowly. Not because I needed the time. Because I wanted to remember every corner of that room. My father's house had been part of my life since I was 12. It was where he taught me to ride a bicycle in the driveway. Where we painted the kitchen together. Where he sat beside me after my first heartbreak and ordered pizza, because he didn't know what else to do. It was where he met Evelyn. And eventually, it became the place where Evelyn decided I didn't belong. At exactly 8:42 p.m., I carried my suitcase downstairs. Evelyn was sitting at the dining table. The banker was beside her. A man from the estate office stood near the window. I recognized him. Mr. Harris. He had handled some of my father's business affairs. Where are you going? Evelyn asked. To a hotel. Good. I stopped. Good. She sighed. Claire, this isn't personal. I looked at the funeral flowers scattered around the room. Of course it isn't. She stood. Your father and I had arrangements. Ich zählte her. What arrangements? She hesitated. Then the banker cleared his throat. Mrs. Bennet, I don't think tonight is the appropriate time. Evelyn shot him a look. He immediately became interested in his folder. I understood. There was something in those papers. Something they didn't want me to see. I walked toward the door. Then Evelyn said, "Your father chose me." I stopped. She continued, "He built this life with me." I turned around. "And he loved me too," she said. "You need to accept that." I looked at her for several seconds. I never said he didn't. Then I opened the door. Cold air rushed inside. Before stepping out, I looked back at the house. I expected to feel destroyed. Instead, I felt something stranger. A quiet certainty. My father had never been careless. He had never made important decisions without thinking several steps ahead. And he had never forgotten me. So if Evelyn was this confident, there was something she knew that I didn't. The question was what? I spent the next 3 days in a small hotel near downtown. I barely slept. My father's funeral replayed in my head over and over. The moment the casket disappeared from view, my aunt crying beside me, Evelyn standing perfectly still, and the banker waiting outside the church. On the 4th morning, I received an email. It was from my father's attorney. The subject line contained only 3 words. Your father's estate. I opened it. The first sentence made me sit upright. Claire, your father left instructions that I contact you personally before any property transfer takes place. I read it twice. Then I called him. His name was Daniel Harris, and he'd known my father for more than 20 years. We met that afternoon in his office. He stood when I entered. I'm sorry, Claire. Thank you. He gestured toward the chair. I sat down. He studied me for a moment. Your father knew there might be conflict after his death. I stared at him. Did he know Evelyn would throw me out? Daniel didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough. What did he leave me? He folded his hands. Before we discuss the will, there's something else you need to understand. What? Your father didn't tell your stepmother everything. I frowned. About what? About you. My heart skipped. Me. Daniel nodded. He asked me to keep certain matters confidential until after his death. I leaned forward. Why? Because he believed revealing them too early would put you in a difficult position. What kind of position? Daniel opened a drawer. He removed a sealed envelope. My name was written across the front in my father's handwriting. Claire. Nothing else. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single letter. I read the first line. My daughter, if you're reading this, I've probably run out of time to explain everything myself. I stopped. Daniel looked away. I continued. Don't let grief make you rush. Don't let anyone pressure you into signing anything. And above all, don't assume the person standing beside you understands the life I've built. I looked up. Daniel. He waited. What did he mean? He wanted you to hear the rest from me. I looked back at the letter. My father had written that he loved me, that he was proud of me, that there were things he had deliberately kept separate from the family home. Then came the sentence that changed everything. Claire, the company you think belongs to your father is not the whole company. I read it again. The company. My father owned Bennett Industrial, a regional manufacturing and logistics business that had grown from a small repair shop into a company worth millions. I had always known that. What I hadn't known was that 6 years earlier, he had created another company, one that held several of his most valuable commercial properties. And I was the controlling beneficiary. I stared at Daniel. Why? Because your father believed you had the judgment to protect what he built. I don't understand. Neither does Evelyn. A strange silence filled the room. Then Daniel said, That's about to change. The next morning, I returned to my father's house. Not as a daughter asking permission. As a beneficiary with legal counsel. Evelyn opened the door. The moment she saw me, her expression hardened. What are you doing here? I came from my father's estate meeting. There's no meeting. Daniel stepped beside me. There is now. Evelyn's face changed. Only slightly. But I noticed. She looked at Daniel. Then at me. Then back at him. What exactly is this? Daniel held up the envelope. Your husband's final instructions. Evelyn stepped back. No. It was the first time I'd seen her lose control. We entered. The house looked different. My father's desk had been cleared. Several boxes had disappeared. His files were gone. I looked at the empty shelves. Where are his business records? Evelyn crossed her arms. I had them organized. Where? That's none of your concern. Daniel looked at me. Actually, it is. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. You people are making a mistake. No, Daniel said calmly. We're correcting one. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. By the end, Evelyn's confidence had disappeared. My father's will gave her the right to remain in the house for a limited period, but ownership was subject to the estate trust. The investment accounts were divided. Certain personal assets went to me, and the company holdings were transferred according to an agreement my father had signed years earlier. Evelyn wasn't penniless. She wasn't abandoned. She simply wasn't entitled to everything she had assumed would be hers. She looked at me. He never told me. I said nothing. You're lying. Daniel shook his head. No. She turned toward me. Claire, you knew. I didn't. She laughed bitterly. You expect me to believe that? I spent 4 days thinking you had thrown me out, because you wanted the house. She stared at me. I thought that was all you wanted. Her expression softened for half a second. Then she said something I didn't expect. I was afraid. I blinked. Of what? Of losing everything. Her voice dropped. Your father kept secrets from me. He wouldn't tell me how much the company was worth. He wouldn't tell me what was in those trusts. Every time I asked, he said I didn't need to know. She looked toward his study. I thought after he died, you'd come after the house. I shook my head. I didn't want the house. She looked at me. I wanted my father. That sentence silenced the room. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. But I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet. There were too many unanswered questions. And one of them was why she had been so desperate to get me out before the estate meeting. Daniel discovered the answer 2 days later. A property transfer document had been prepared before my father's death. Someone had attempted to move ownership of one of the commercial properties. The signature appeared to be my father's. But the date was wrong. He had been hospitalized that week. He couldn't have signed it. Daniel immediately referred the matter for formal review. I didn't accuse Evelyn. I didn't accuse anyone. I waited. That was something my father had taught me. Never make an accusation when evidence can speak for you. So we gathered records, emails, bank statements, property documents, corporate filings, meeting notes, and slowly, a picture emerged. Evelyn had not created the fraudulent document herself. Her brother, Mark, had. Mark had been involved in my father's company for years. He had always been friendly with me. Too friendly, perhaps. He called me kiddo. He sent Christmas cards. He told everyone how proud he was of my father. But behind the scenes he had accumulated debt. A lot of it. And he had convinced Evelyn that the only way to protect the family was to transfer certain assets before the estate was frozen. Evelyn had believed him. That didn't excuse what she had done. But it explained why she had acted so desperately. When confronted, Mark denied everything. Then the records were presented. His denials became quieter. Finally, he looked at Evelyn. I'm sorry. She stared at him. You used me. I was trying to protect us. You told me Claire was going to take everything. I thought she would. Evelyn turned toward me. I saw something in her face I hadn't seen before. I believed him, she whispered. I didn't know what to say. So I told the truth. You should have asked me. She nodded. I know. The legal process took months. Nothing happened overnight. That mattered. Because real life isn't a movie where one document appears and everyone suddenly gets justice. There were meetings, reviews, questions, lawyers, delays, stress. There were days when I wanted to forget the whole thing. But every time I considered walking away, I remembered the empty bedroom, the suitcase, 20 minutes, and the way Evelyn had said I had no place in my father's home. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted accountability. Eventually, the investigation determined that Mark had acted without authorization. The questionable transfer was cancelled. The company was reorganized. Mark was removed from his position and faced the consequences of his actions through the proper legal process. Evelyn wasn't charged. But she lost something too. Trust. Not just mine. The company's. The family's. Her own confidence in the people she had believed would protect her. Months later, I found myself standing in my father's study again. The room was almost empty. I had kept his desk, his chair, his fountain pen. Everything else had been sorted. Evelyn entered quietly. "Can I talk to you?" I nodded. She sat across from me. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "I owe you an apology." I waited. "I was cruel to you." "Yes." She looked down. "I thought if I pushed you out first, I couldn't be pushed out myself. I understood that more than I wanted to. But you didn't have to make me pay for your fear." "I know." She took a breath. "I can't undo that night." "No. But I can tell you something your father told me once." I looked up. "What?" "He said you were the strongest person he'd ever met." My throat tightened. "When?" "About a year before he died." She smiled sadly. "He said you didn't realize it yet." I looked toward the window. For years, I had thought strength meant never needing anyone. My father had taught me otherwise. Strength was knowing when to ask questions, knowing when to wait, knowing when to walk away, and knowing when not to become cruel simply because someone had been cruel to you. Evelyn stood. "I'm moving out." I looked at her. "I didn't ask you to." "I know." She hesitated. "I think I need to start over somewhere else." I nodded. "Take care of yourself." She smiled faintly. "You too." After she left, I opened the final drawer of my father's desk. Inside was a small wooden box. I recognized it immediately. It was the box where he used to keep old photographs. I opened it. There was a picture of me at 16. Another from college. One of my father teaching me how to drive. And beneath them was a second letter. This one wasn't addressed to Claire. It said, "For the day she finally understands." I opened it. My father's handwriting looked unsteady. "Claire, if you ever find yourself reading this, I hope it means you've discovered that the things I've left behind aren't what matter most." I smiled through tears. He continued, "Money can protect a person from certain problems. Property can create security. A company can employ thousands of people. But none of those things can tell you who you are." I kept reading. "You are not my daughter because I gave you an inheritance. You are my daughter because you learned to stand on your own feet even when I wasn't there to hold your hand." I stopped. For a long time, I couldn't continue. Then I did. "I know people will tell you what you should do after I'm gone. Some will want what I left. Some will tell you what I would have wanted. Don't believe anyone who uses my memory to control you." My eyes moved to the final paragraph. "Think carefully. Be fair. Protect what deserves protecting. And if you have to choose between being right and being cruel, choose kindness. You can still be firm." I folded the letter. That was the moment I understood who I really was. Not the wealthy daughter Evelyn had feared. Not the heir Mark had underestimated. Not the woman who had been thrown out of her father's house. I was Claire. A woman my father had trusted to make her own decisions. And that was worth more than everything he had left me. A year after his death, I made a decision. I didn't sell the company. I didn't turn it into some monument to my father. Instead, I worked with the management team to modernize it. We created scholarships for employees' children. We expanded training programs. We kept the small factory where my father had started everything. I visited it one afternoon without telling anyone. An older employee recognized me. "You must be Claire." I smiled. "How did you know?" He laughed. "You have your father's eyes." I looked around the factory floor. Machines hummed. People worked. Forklifts moved through the loading area. My father had started with one broken machine and a rented building. Now hundreds of families depended on the company. I finally understood why he had been so careful. He wasn't protecting money. He was protecting people. That evening, I drove to his grave. I sat on the bench nearby. The sun was going down. I figured it out, Dad, I said quietly. The wind moved through the trees. I finally figured out what you were trying to teach me. I smiled. You didn't leave me a fortune. I looked toward the headstone. You left me responsibility. And somehow, that felt like the greatest inheritance of all. I still think about the night Evelyn told me to pack. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if she had simply said, "Claire, stay." Maybe we would have avoided months of conflict. Maybe I would have helped her understand the estate. Maybe she would have trusted me. But life doesn't give us alternate versions. It gives us the consequences of the choices people actually make. Evelyn made hers. Mark made his. My father made his years before any of us understood them. And I made mine. I chose not to let betrayal turn me into someone I didn't recognize. I chose evidence over rumors. Patience over rage. Justice over revenge. And eventually forgiveness without forgetting. That last part took the longest. Forgiveness didn't mean pretending Evelyn's actions were acceptable. It meant refusing to carry them forever. The house eventually became mine. For months, I couldn't bring myself to live there. Then one spring morning, I opened every window. Fresh air moved through the rooms. I removed the heavy curtains Evelyn had chosen. I put my father's books back on the shelves. I placed the photograph from my old bedroom on his desk. And beside it, I placed the fountain pen he'd given me. The same pen I'd carried out the night I was kicked out. I smiled when I looked at it. He had been right. I had needed it for something important. Not to sign away my inheritance. Not to fight a battle. But to sign the documents that allowed me to build a future of my own choosing. A future my father would never see. But one I hoped he would have been proud of. People sometimes ask me what happened after my stepmother kicked me out. They expect a dramatic answer. They expect me to say I destroyed her. I didn't. The truth is quieter. She discovered that I wasn't powerless. She discovered that my father had trusted me. She discovered that the person she thought she could remove from the picture was actually at the center of everything he had spent years protecting. But most importantly, I discovered something too. I discovered that losing a parent doesn't mean losing everything they gave you. My father left me money. He left me a business. He left me property. But those things were never his greatest gift. He left me the ability to think before reacting. The courage to ask difficult questions. The patience to wait for the truth. And the strength to walk away without becoming bitter. The night I left his house with one suitcase, I thought I was being thrown out of my father's life. I was wrong. I was being pushed into the part of my life where I finally had to stand on my own. And 3 years later, when I stood in that same doorway with the keys in my hand, I realized something that would have made my father smile. I hadn't come back to take what was mine. I had come back because I had finally learned that I never needed permission to belong.